it over to Yoel. My name is Christy Ottoman-Ritter. I'm here with Diane Porterfield from the Connect and Communicate Series Planning Committee. And we want to thank you all for joining us for the Connect and Communicate series presenting civic literacy as a campus outreach tool, ShipVotes. This discussion is being recorded and it will be made available to Pennsylvania Library Association College and Research Division members through the PALA website, as well as sent to registrants and available on the CRD blog. For this discussion, you only need a headset or speakers. We encourage you to ask questions in the chat box at the bottom right throughout the discussion, and we'll attempt to include your questions as appropriate during the discussion or at the end. We'll also do our best to assist participants with technical issues. Please post those in the chat box as well. This session is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Library Association College and Research Division's Connect and Communicate series. I'd like to thank the CRD board for supporting the Connect and Communicate initiative and the other Connect and Communicate Planning Committee members, including Ronalise Sioko, Sarah Pike, and Amy Snyder. Please contact any one of the team for information about becoming a PALA member. This project is made possible by a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services as administered by the Pennsylvania Department of Education through the Office of Commonwealth Libraries and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf Governor. And finally, I'd like to thank and introduce our presenter for today's event, Yoel DeLessa. He received his Master of Library and Information Science degree from the University of Maryland, College Park in 2015. After graduating, he worked as a youth services librarian in Prince George's County, Maryland from 2016 to 2018, and adult services librarian in Montgomery County, Maryland from 2018 to 2020, and currently serves as the reference outreach and instruction librarian at Shippensburg University. And with that, I'd like to welcome Yoel and turn the presentation over to them.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Yoel DeLessa. As Christy mentioned, I am the Reference Outreach and Instruction Librarian at Shippensburg University. Today, I will be talking a little bit, or a lot of it, about our work here with our nonpartisan voting education coalition called ShipVotes, which I was one of the faculty leaders for, along with a few other faculty members. I have a PowerPoint, you know how this goes, online presentation, but I would really like to hear if this is, I understand that this is something that a lot of different libraries, regardless of, academic or public, might have done in their own sort of sphere. So if at any point, if you have any feedback, anything about anything I said, or want to share your own experience, feel free to share. I would like to make this as Socratic as possible. And thank you all for coming, and happy National Library Week to everybody. It just happened that my presentation fell on that week when we planned it back in October, but I'm really glad to be here. I'm new to academic libraries, fairly new. I've been an academic librarian for only about 13, 14 months. It's really interesting. I love it. I love the work. I love working with students. And yeah, this feels a little awkward. It feels like I'm teaching a UNIV 101 class right now with all the blank boxes, but I'll manage. I'll manage. So thank you all for coming. Thank you. You didn't have to turn your cameras on. But I do appreciate it. It's like, verbal cue, nonverbal cues are awesome. Head nod, a smile, it goes a long way. But I understand. I think it was in the email was said, like, if you have your camera off, it will help with connection. Am I wrong? I think that was said in the email. So I understand if you keep it off. Vitalina, what did I do before? I will talk about that. It's a great question, part of my presentation. So why don't we get that started? So many PowerPoints. I'm like drowning in PowerPoints. Wouldn't it be funny if I gave a room full of librarians one of my information literacy? Just started talking about information literacy. All right. So again, thank you all for coming to this talk. I hope today that I we can all discuss potential ways academic libraries can widen the scope of outreach programming. And that's one of the things, obviously this is about our civic literacy outreach that we did last semester, but in it, I think there's an opportunity for academic libraries to really think about the ways that we do outreach on campus. I hope to display how civic literacy intersects with our efforts to increase information literacy. That's one of the main things that helped me with my information literacy sort of instruction last semester, was intersecting it with civic literacy and making it more topical to the students, something that they can really, touch and feel. And then outline possible ways to coordinate with campus partners and grow relationships that can positively impact students. A part of the work that we did last semester with ShipVotes helped me sort of ingratiate myself to many different parts of the campus. So it was a way I use ShipVotes as a way to get in with a lot of different departments and groups on campus that can ultimately be major players and partners to us here at the library and are right now. So a little bit about my background. So I grew up in Montgomery County, Maryland, if anybody is familiar, but it's a super diverse area, and I grew up in the libraries there. I went to the University of Maryland College Park for my undergraduate and graduate degrees, and then I went on to intern and then work both in the Prince George's County Memorial Library System as a youth services librarian, and then as an adult services librarian in the Montgomery County Public Library System. And working in public libraries really informed the way that I approach outreach now on an academic campus. When I was in public libraries, especially as a youth services librarian, you really have like, what is outreach? Like it's so many different things, right? So you're visiting schools. This is a picture from a school visit that I did. It was awesome. It was an all-day event. It was like 100 fourth graders, 100 fifth graders, 100 second graders. The kindergartners were the best. And you're going to daycare centers. One time I went to the zoo. Your hours are a little bit flexible because you're trying to, especially in Prince George's County, we were trying to target parents that might not be able to make it to the library for a story time at 10 a.m. because they're working or have other obligations. So we would go to schools at night for 7 p.m. programs or PSA meetings. So really makes you question or really sort of understand that outreach is large. It can be super comprehensive and you have to be mindful of your audience. What is information? Like when I was an adult services librarian, the programming we did with information was a wide scope. Like you would have consumer protection come in and do a program about consumer protection. That's considered information, but then we'd host meditation evenings and that's considered information as well. You're teaching computer classes, which is like in the, I guess, traditional aspect of information, but then at the same time, you might have like Amharic story time for your Ethiopian community. So thinking about information and the wide range of ways information can apply to your community. That's sort of my background that I came into this job with. And so when I got to Shippensburg, it was, there is a lot like reference, obviously, is not going to be too different. You're going to do reference the way that it's been done, and you're going to try to help the students the best that you can. Instruction, you have a little flexibility there with the way that you teach, but for the most part, you have an instruction coordinator and you have sort of a plan, a coordinated plan with the way you want to teach information literacy. With outreach, there's a lot of task variability. There's a lot of room in that job description to say, okay, well, you can do what you think is important. Or so in my background with public libraries, I was like, well, I don't know, what to do with outreach on an academic campus. Like what do you all do traditionally? And it was, citation workshops, like doing sort of programming and workshops around helping students with finding databases and navigating databases, which are awesome, very useful, very useful for students. But at the same time, it was like when I was thinking about the ways that we could do outreach, is like we kind of do this already through instruction. We teach students how to navigate the databases and how to do citations through instruction, or even reference. Like there's a student comes to you for a reference consultation or a reference appointment, you're going to help them, with those needs. So why don't we address needs that we maybe necessarily aren't meeting with reference and instruction? So with that being said, I tried to think of it with a public library background. Like, let's expand outreach, the definition of outreach, and let's expand the definition of information. Okay. So in thinking about that, in public libraries, is there a question? Someone unmuted? I thought there was a question. I'm not like big on lecturing. So if anyone has any questions at any point or want to interrupt, please do. So when I was thinking about it, especially in public libraries, there was a captive audience model, is how I phrased it to my department chair when I was bringing this to him, where again, we're going to the schools. It's not necessarily people coming to the library, but you're taking the library to them. At one point when I was a youth services librarian, our building, our large, very popular library closed for renovation. And we moved essentially to a storefront. It was a very small space, and that kind of forced us to take our programming outside of the library. And that's where I really saw the impact this can have when you go to where people are, as opposed to expecting people to come to you. And so that's where, when I was thinking about outreach, I was like, instead of doing a workshop here at the library, why don't I try to find places on campus where students already are, whether it's SGA events or through the Office of Multicultural Student Affairs or through athletics, where students are already gathering. And then I just kind of slip in there and I'm like, hey, the library's here as well, and they want to talk to you all about some things that they have going on. And there's a lot of pros to this approach. There's a lot of cons to this approach as well. But so the pros have heavily outweigh the cons to me. I think the cons really is, it's a little more work, in my opinion. If you're in the library already, you have a program at 3 o'clock, you're in your office, then you walk to the program room, and then you wait for people to come, and then that's really it. And then you're doing all the planning around that. But when you're going to where other programs are being held and you're just being a part of that program, it certainly requires a little more coordination, even a little more effort on your part. But to have that impact, I think that captive audience model does work with outreach. So that brings us to ShipVotes. So when I was approached last spring by Dr. Katie Clay, who's now a professor emeritus, but at the time she was a history professor, and she had been the faculty leader for ShipVotes, which is a nonpartisan voting initiative on campus. And so last spring, right before the pandemic, Dr. Clay approached me and asked if the library would be interested in being a part of the programming that ShipVotes was doing in the spring. And one of the things we had planned was a voter education session for a few of the sports teams here on campus. Right across the hall from where the librarians are is our Raider Academic Center, which is a student success center specifically for student athletes. And so it made sense, right? We're here, Raider Academic Center is right there. So let's coordinate with them to do a voter education session. And then the pandemic happens. We were planning to do it in the library in one of our computer labs. We shifted it to an online version, and we had 100% turnout. And the reason we had 100% turnout is because we went to like a study hall that students were required to be. So it was like an online study hall, and we just kind of worked with our director for the Radar Academic Centers to say, could we just do it at this time? Because that, if you all think back to last year, no, like if you're trying to tell students, hey, come to this voting online in your own time, like it just was like, no one's going to come to this. So I applied that captive audience model to say, could we go to where the students are already required to be maybe? And they were willing to give us that time. And so it was successful. We had a good session, good questions from the students. And so that kind of got my mind going like, okay, maybe we could do this on a larger scale. And so Dr. Clay voluntold me into leadership for ShipVotes. I did not know she was retiring. So at the end of the semester, myself and another faculty member, his name is Dave Monahan in sociology, we're on a call with her, and she's like, so what are you all going to do in the fall? Like, ShipVotes is your thing now. What are you all planning to do? And it was like, oh, that's what's happening right now. Like, it's, so we have, obviously we're happy to do it, but it just kind of happened that way. And that last summer was a lot of work, but we kind of committed to this, and I got, I told my chair, this is sort of how I'm thinking about outreach, like captive audience model with civic literacy, and we just used the library as a tool for this, and they were totally on board. So we did a lot of work, and this is where we started to see some of the benefits with this expanded definition of outreach. So we applied for a grant from Students Learn, Students Vote, which is a national coalition, a nonpartisan national coalition for, just programming and tools and materials. And so we won $10,000 through that grant. And that grant ultimately helped us do many things. One of them, hosting exhibits here in the library and online. But we have these, we got to pay and get these like really cool, I don't know if everyone can see that, but like posters that we can use for the exhibit, that sort of stuff that it's not necessarily from a library. It's not from like IMLS or anything like that, but it was a grant that ultimately helped to support our program here. Sorry about that. So we also got to work with different campus partners. And so two of the big ones, which I'll talk about, are athletics and the Office of Multicultural Student Affairs. So in the summer, when you're approaching people during a huge election year and you're saying, hi, the library wants to work with you, they're not necessarily as eager as opposed to say, hi, the nonpartisan voting coalition wants to work with you. Then they're like, okay, you get prompt responses back to emails when you're making that sort of approach. So that allowed us to expand sort of the groups that we worked with on campus. And so fall 2020, almost 100% of our outreach was focused around voter engagement, civic literacy, as part of the library and as part of the ShipVotes coalition. So that's kind of like a timeline of how this happened. Thank you. We also got posters I hope to share. We got so many posters. We actually ended up having to give it a little bit of the money back because we couldn't use all of it, which was a bummer, but it was good to have it. So these are a few of our campus partners. And again, so for me as a librarian and as a leader, as a faculty co-leader for ShipVotes, this is a great way to plug information literacy, library resources to these large sort of audiences. And so one of the things that we did with athletics was host voter education sessions for all of the student athletes on campus. And so the athletic director coordinated. It's great to have administration behind you because they can just do things like that, like mandate that students come to this, or the teams participate in this. And so over I think it was 3 days, September feels like an eternity ago, we did voter education sessions for all the teams on campus. And so in that, you're talking to them about voting, but you're sneaking in like information literacy concepts. You're also saying, I'm from the library, and here's some of the things that we do at the library. And if you have any questions outside of voting, please come and see me. So you're able to kind of give the library a large sort of like platform to operate on. So this is
So the goal of the initiative is
this is a video from one of the sessions. Oops.
So the goal of the initiative is to get all students registered to vote, and with one ShipVotes, to get all student athletes registered to vote. It's our time to make a change for the future. Us young people have such power and such an opportunity to make a change in our government and our democracy. It's important that we register to vote and vote for people who we want to see make those changes.
So yeah, that was over 500 students in a few days. So that, again, the voting engagement was the big piece, but as a librarian, you're definitely working in the information literacy into that. And again, giving the library sort of a larger platform for the students to know, have a face to put with the library. You know, I'm a librarian, I'm from the library, but I'm also a leader for ShipVotes. And so now that lends you to, you know, grow relationships that are still having an impact to this day. One of the other groups that we got to work with really close was the Office of Multicultural Student Affairs. And this is a picture with myself and Sierra Gutierrez, who's one of the leaders from MSA. And so this is from election day itself. We did like tabling at the bus to give people water and give them information, that sort of stuff. These are t-shirts that MSA was able to print and have done with some of the funding that we got from that SLSV grant. And so they were instrumental in helping us get one of our objectives was to get voter education out to students of color. And so they were a huge partner in that and really helped initiate that sort of work. And again, another great place that Ms. Dye, who's the director of MSA, and Capri Brown, who is the assistant director, are now great partners, not just for ShipVotes, but of the library. We did a voter suppression and information literacy workshop with them. We did a number of different sort of informal, where I'm dropping into the student groups when they're meeting, just to talk about voting. So it really was awesome to have them as a partner, to get the word out about, you know, getting the vote out, but also about, hey, the library is also a great place for you to go and get help with anything that you might need help with as far as academics goes. So this is one of the ways that, so during all of this, you're also a librarian who has 60 something information and instruction sessions, mostly for me with first year, what we call first year experience classes. So UNIV 101, academic writing, human communications. And so, and then we did also separate from that, strictly ShipVotes voter education workshop. So over 80 different sessions with both of them. But in all of them, I try to embed the civic literacy information. So one of the things we talked about was voter turnout for young people. And Ibram Kendi actually has a great piece in the Atlantic talking about how first-time voting is not necessarily about apathy, which is the popular sort of reason that young people don't vote, is because they don't care. But it's really, if you think about it, a matter of information literacy. First-time voting is an overwhelming process. You have to locate and evaluate and effectively use information, and it's very easy to just put it off and be like, I'll do this next time. And so connecting the low voter turnout to the need for information became easy to do with you know, information instruction. Because what I always try to help with the students is like, information literacy is a day-to-day thing. It's not just with your academic research, you're doing it all the time. If you want to find a good burger spot and you look up good burgers in Shippensburg and you only get, you know, a few results, and one of them is Bob's Burgers, and the only review you have is from Bob saying like, this is awesome, 5 stars, you're probably going to be hesitant. like that's information literacy right there. You're evaluating that information with a critical eye. And so just like you're doing that naturally, the voting stuff as a first-time voter might not be as natural and might take a little bit work. And so what we're trying to do here with ShipVotes is try to make this a little bit easier for you, make that information accessible to you. And so I worked and a number of my colleagues just use that as a way to connect that information to them in their research. So that's really my talk. So a part of it, I think just, again, reframing what outreach is on an academic campus. And I know this is a wide group and there are public librarians in the virtual room. So I would love to hear how public libraries did this. Right before I left Montgomery County libraries as an adult services librarian, one of the big initiatives we were part of was with census information. And again, that informed me to say, okay, voting is important on an academic campus too. So we're working with like the Census Bureau and getting workers in the library for programming to help people with that sort of information. But I think it's just to play a part in the community. It's not if you're even on an academic campus, it's not necessarily about keeping all your stuff to yourself here inside the library, but go out and, you know, knock on some doors, get to know who the players are on campus that really interact with students on a real level, and, you know, help the students. We talked about this, capitalizing on the opportunity to latch information literacy concepts to relevant topics. So last semester was voting, but I think it just helps with any sort of, just in our instruction, if we can find ways to connect it to them, whether it's social media or current topics. One of the big things I'm using in my work right now is not just with policing, but the school to prison pipeline and trying to connect that to information literacy. So trying to make it relevant to the students. Work in good faith with campus partners, not only to bolster library, but also to support their programming. This is something I had to learn. Like, I'm not going out and working with athletics just to plug the library. I earnestly want to help them. And if I get called upon by them to help with anything, then I want to reciprocate that. And it helps to grow the relationship with the campus community. So if people in athletics or MSA or first gen student alliance know that you're working with them and helping them, it really does help. So that's my talk. I really wasn't planning on an hour, so I'm glad I didn't go for an hour. But I'd love to, you know, talk about some of the experiences. I tried to summarize it. There was a lot of work, and I was sharing a little bit before everyone got into the room that, you know, we were successful in our mind, but there's definitely some things that if we were to do this again, we want to rethink or reconsider. And it came at a cost. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of energy. So it's not something that I want to pass off as like we did an awesome job with and there's nothing that we wouldn't redo or anything like that. It was definitely a learning experience. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. So folks, if you have any questions or anything you would like to share, you can drop it in the chat. Or if you would like to speak, if you just want to raise your hand, one of us can go ahead and unmute you then. So I do see a question in the chat. What would you do differently next time?
That's a great question. I'm actually going to go back to sharing my screen. So this is from our website. So one of the things that was awesome that we got to do was work with university marketing to get a website up that was a one-stop shop for students. And in this homepage, this wasn't my idea, but we just put out there how the university could support us. And I think that's what we would work harder to do next time, is try to get more of an administrative institutional support for our programming. It's not that they worked against us at all. Anytime we you know, again, with this was an administrative thing. An administrator helped get us this website up. But, you know, there's a few things like we had to go out and find the funding for ourselves, or just with marketing and materials like t-shirts, that sort of stuff that the university could have, it would have been easier if the university helped us with. So these are a few things that we've tried to reach out and talk to the university about. And so I think there's going to be more of an effort moving forward to just try to make, to try to institutionalize this more, as opposed to having it just be a few faculty members and a few students, by the way, who were instrumental. We had 4 students that were awesome with this. So that would be a big thing that we would try to change. At one point, my wife has a cry cut, and we were like printing the cry cuts, you know, printing and like ironing the t-shirts on ourselves. And it was like, it's a lot of work. I wish we could get somebody to do this for us. What else can librarians do besides presentations? That's another great question. So you can coordinate. So one of the things we did was coordinate tabling. So we did have hybrid instruction here at Shippensburg. So students were on campus. So we coordinated a number of like tables for students to just pick up a few pieces of information. And it was led by a few of our students. So we were just supporting the students in that. The libraries are, you know, hopefully will be again in post-pandemic times, very popular. So as students are coming in and leaving, just having some information there for them. And so, yeah, that was one of the ways that we tried to do it outside of presentations, was the in-person sort of interactions. That's a great question, Maureen. Which partnerships with other departments have been the most successful, and how so after ShipVotes? But I mean, there's a few of them, to be honest, and the ones that I highlighted were our most successful to me, as making an impact on the library's impact on students. So athletics, working with our one of our senior athletic directors, her name is Carrie Michaels, and she was gung-ho about voting, but then when you know, we've had great meetings and talks about the ways libraries can support athletics in general outside of the voting, and she's made that possible. So we've had monthly programming with the Raider Academic Center with their student athletes there, and it's been awesome. They've been supportive, and I think it's really just, again, getting the word out. Like the libraries here, we have outreach, like, which a lot of them didn't know, like outreaching is a part of our initiatives and job duties. So any way we can support you, we'd love to. So when you tell people that, they're like, sure, like, can you come to this? Can you attend this? We have this going on. So it really becomes easier. But yeah, athletics has been a huge partner in that. That's another great question. We had a running joke that we couldn't, so is it Khalida? Khalida, apologies, no apology needed. How did you decide how you'd measure success, or what a successful outcome would be? And we had a running joke that we couldn't fail. Like, if there was any students that were gonna vote, us doing any sort of outreach was not gonna make them be like, I'm not gonna vote now. So all we can do is then get the students that were apathetic or didn't know or whatever to get them to vote. So we were operating from a place that it was hard for us to fail. And so really what we tried to do was track as much of our programming as we could. So I have like a Google Doc for all the class visits that I did, strictly for ShipVotes stuff, not my own information and literacy instruction, but just ShipVotes, all the programming we did with athletics, all the programming we did with the Women's Center, all of that, attendance, that sort of stuff. And just, you know, I think that number got to about 900 students that attended those events. So that was like, that's great. We didn't have a number in mind, but we'll take that as a success. And then there's actually an organization called NSolve that we're a part of, we're a member of, and it's run through the Tufts College. And so they track voter turnout and voter participation. So we're gonna hopefully have those numbers this summer, but we'll be able to see in the fall of 2016, this was our voter turnout by age for the presidential election. And then in the fall of 2020, this is our voter turnout. So we'll be able to actually see what our voter turnout is compared to other years. Another great question. Did you measure whether and what kind of follow-up interaction registrants initiated with the library as a result of this project? No, not really. The hope is that they, like there's, I guess that would be a good thing to track, and it would be interesting to see what the fruit of those efforts is, but we didn't have a specific measuring system. I just know that I interacted with a number of students that did not know what I did on campus or that I was even a librarian, and I was able to introduce myself and get to know them, and now I see them around campus or they have reference consultations with me. But I don't know if, you know, like that was strictly from that event or if it could have happened other ways. But I just know there was a lot of interactions with students that I felt like, or told me, you know, I didn't know you did that, or even staff members and you know, around campus, which to me was, you know, a part of the work, was like just introducing myself, introducing the library. Great questions. And so this semester, one of the things, because that was another thing I wanted to talk about, is like the national election, like huge election, very consequential election. It was very easy to do this as far as like getting people to get on board and work with you. Now that it's over, we're still continuing. So we're doing this semester, we're doing around local elections and getting students to engage with the local elections that are going on. So we reached out, and that's actually a little bit easier because, you know, it's much easier to get in touch with the candidates. Like we have the list of the school board elections, the mayor, the sheriff, that sort of stuff. So we reached out to them, and we're working with, it's called SUTV. It's our student-run TV programming here on campus, to do like just talks, asking them, you know, what you're doing, what you're running for, why your position is important, why students should care about local elections. So we're doing like a local election campaign this semester. So just trying to keep the momentum, and then hopefully, you know, that'll carry us into the primaries and the general, and then, you know, things like that. Yeah. How did you spend the grant money? Great question. Materials were the big thing. So all this was a learning process for me. I didn't know there was like a grant office on campus like that I should reach out to beforehand to make sure everything was good and regulated. But luckily it all worked out. But we ended up getting the funds like in October, which was not a part of our so something we would do different is like make sure we had our money in like August. But a lot of materials, so whether it was exhibit materials, t-shirts, buttons, we did raffles. So one of our students ran our the ShipVotes social media site, and they would do like Amazon gift card raffles and stuff like that. So a lot of materials was spent on, and that's just because of the sort of the restrictions around how you can spend the money. So if you wanted to, like, for instance, pay for a speaker, there's like a process you have to go through where the funds had to be approved and all that. We just didn't have the time. So we ended up just spending our money where we knew it could be spent. So a lot of it was on campus. So we worked with our university marketing, printing office to just like print posters, t-shirts, that sort of thing. Yeah. We got these, sorry, one moment. Our students designed did like fun designs of posters. I don't know if that says like vote like your future depends on it, and then there's QR codes on there. So there's like 6 or 7 designs like this that students submitted, and we printed hundreds of these and plastered them all over campus. So that was a big part of our funding. Um, so a lot of what happened with like the actual student interactions is, you're doing a lot of programming in August and September, and you're encouraging students to apply by mail or apply for absentee ballot, that sort of thing. But as the election day came closer and closer and closer, especially within the last like 10 days, that was when we saw, like, I was getting emails. I was like, how did students even find my email? So I was getting emails, I was getting phone calls with students asking questions. And yeah, so we had a few students that were from out of state. And so on our website, we share here. On our website, we have Pennsylvania and we have Maryland. That's our 2 largest student body is made of people from Pennsylvania and Maryland. But then we had a student voting resources page that had links to other places that could help you out with it. So the voter friendly campus, or even like the campus vote project, they have links to other states. So if a student told me I'm from New York, I would just try to navigate through the CVP website to try to find like the New York voter information and walk them through like how to apply for absentee ballot and that sort of thing. So that was when that question came up, which it did. We just used some of the resources we had here. And all of these are partners of ours too. So the Campus Election Engagement Project is a great organization, national organization that will partner with campuses, and they'll pay students to be SEEP fellows. So 2 of the students that we worked with were SEEP fellows, and they were awesome, and they're getting paid, and it's kind of like their job. So it was great. And then the Students Learn, Students Vote. These are all would have like monthly coalition meetings where they're just sharing information about best practices and that sort of stuff. So it was really helpful to have these national organizations as a guiding sort of light for the work that we were doing on campus. Yeah, and I just want to stress that this was a group effort. I was from the library, so it made sense to present on like sort of the library's work in this. And yeah, Dave Monahan in sociology, Dr. Katie Clay from history were 2 other faculty members that led this initiative with me. And then Katie Clay had established a lot of these relationships we have with SEEP and CVP and Students Learn, Students Vote, these national sort of organizations. So it was kind of, although she volunteered me into the position, it was, she didn't just leave me empty-handed. She gave me a lot of resources to work with. Great question, Mark. Rest. Is anyone else here involved in anything like this or want to? Yeah.
I guess I could talk briefly. I'm at Community College of Philadelphia, and I am part of a project called CCP Votes. And it's a pretty big effort, mostly by the administration, and I'm just there to support and just sort of like be there and have a voice from the library. I was on a panel yesterday about how to be involved in politics, and there was a lot of students, leaders who were involved in politics already, and one of the things that they said were that the Trump presidency really activated a lot of them, and they were really motivated to get involved. And now they're leaders and like making an impact and just involved in these great organizations. And they all said, like, the advice they gave to other students was, if you're involved, if you're interested in something, do your research and learn about the issue. And so that wasn't me saying it, was them saying it. So I think that civic literacy and civic engagement is being recognized by campuses all over. And students right now are really engaged. I mean, students are always involved in politics, but now is a time where I think a lot of students are engaged, and research is always a part of almost any kind of political involvement or activism. So it's a great opportunity for the library to be there.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And you mentioned the students. Again, we had a handful of students that we couldn't have done this with, even just from the day-to-day sort of like tabling. I couldn't table in front of the library. My day's full of instruction and reference, and a lot of the stuff that I was doing for ShipVotes with the grant writing and the planning was happening on the weekend. So during the week, I have libraries, like strict library stuff to do. So it was very helpful to have the students who are a little more flexibility in their schedules with that sort of stuff, and driving the initiative and having students interact with students is going to be the best way. That's a lot of the research has shown for even voter engagement, student to student interactions are going to have more of an impact than in a classroom or at a presentation.
I agree completely.
Yeah, so people are sharing in the chat, and and I've seen it too, where through the you go to the national coalition sort of meetings, and it'll be interesting how many librarians are there. There's a few departments from campuses that are widely represented. So political science would always have a few representatives, and then like student affairs definitely would have students. And there will be librarians there, and I think it's a natural sort of home for a lot of this but it's also about what people are able to do. You need the staffing, you need the support, you need the time. So I've had a few meetings with other librarians and other people involved in this work who it's simply not tenable with the workload that they have. And so it's about you have to protect your energy, but it's picking and choosing your battles. Last semester, it made a lot of sense. So yeah, it's, from even having a guide created, I know that's a lot of libraries had LibGuides created around civic literacy and voting information. So any little or any large amount goes a long way.
And folks, we are nearing the end of our time here. So if you have any additional comments or questions for Yoel, please feel free to unmute and ask them or drop them in the chat. We'll give it another minute or two, and then we will start thinking about wrapping up.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming.
Okay, hearing none, just seeing loads of thank yous. Why don't we go ahead and wrap up? So I'd like to thank you all for joining us today, and UL, thank you for presenting this for us. I do hope everyone will take a few moments to complete our survey and let us know your thoughts about the presentation today and about our programming in general. Diane just put the link in the chat. As a reminder, the recording will be available to PALA members early next week through the PALA website. If you're not a PALA member and you're interested in becoming a member, please feel free to email me and I'll have the appropriate person contact you. I also invite you to contact one of us with your suggestions for future discussions and presentations, and I definitely invite you to contact me if you yourself would like to present. With all of that said, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.